A single lie whispered under moonlight, a final kiss that tasted of deceit, and a violent shove into icy black water. In that heartbeat, Michael realized the two people he loved most had planned to kill him. They betrayed him in cold blood, and they thought the dark ocean would keep their secret forever. Michael Grant had once believed in love and loyalty with all his heart. He was a devoted husband and a trusting friend, the kind of man who would hand over the keys to his world without a second thought. His wife Julia and his best friend David were pillars of his life, family, confidant, brother in all but blood. So when Julia gently entwined her fingers with his, and David clapped a proud hand on his shoulder, Michael felt nothing but gratitude and warmth. The idea that these two could ever conspire against him was unthinkable. Yet that night on the boat proved how deeply wrong he was. Their betrayal cut deeper than any knife. It felt like his very soul had been stabbed. Trust shattered in an instant, splintering into a million pieces and sinking into darkness. They had built their lives around promises and dreams, and with one unforgivable act, those dreams were set ablaze. Michael's world was destroyed in seconds, but the story did not end at the bottom of the ocean, and the revenge it would spark had only just begun. It all started innocently enough, years before that fateful night. Michael and Julia's love story bloomed in the early 2000s, full of soft music, shared dreams, and whispered promises of forever. He remembered the way she looked at him on their wedding day, eyes brimming with tears of joy, and the warmth of her vows. At his side stood David, Michael's childhood friend turned business partner, grinning with genuine pride as he watched his best friend marry the woman he adored. In that moment, Michael felt like the luckiest man alive. He had everything: a thriving career, the promise of wealth on the horizon, and two people beside him who he believed truly cared for him. Beneath the surface of their happy lives, however, small warning signs rippled like undercurrents. There were late-night phone calls that Julia dismissed as nothing important. Occasionally, Michael noticed a strange tension when he entered the room unexpectedly, Julia and David exchanging quick, guilty glances before forcing a smile. Once, Michael caught a fleeting shadow in Julia's eyes, something like guilt or fear, but she laughed it off before he could worry. David, usually so jovial, had moments of distant silence whenever Michael excitedly discussed their future, especially the huge contract their company was about to sign, which promised a windfall of millions. Michael chalked it up to stress or modesty on David's part. He never imagined that what he perceived as stress was actually anticipation. Michael was a generous soul who saw only the good in those he loved. When he finally closed the big deal in 2003 to sell his tech startup, he wanted to celebrate by taking Julia on a private weekend boat cruise and inviting David along as a thank you for years of friendship and hard work. It was meant to be a gift for them, a token of his gratitude and love. He was blissfully unaware that his kindness was playing straight into their hands. Michael's vulnerability was that he trusted blindly. He ignored how Julia's smile no longer reached her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. He overlooked how David's hand sometimes trembled when lifting a toast to Michael's success. All those subtle red flags went unnoticed. His unwavering trust was about to be repaid with unfathomable treachery. The night of the cruise was clear and calm, a deceptive peace. Michael stood on the deck under the stars, breathing in the salt air and feeling genuinely happy. Julia had been affectionate all evening, and David jovial as ever, raising a glass in toast to new beginnings. Yet something was off that Michael couldn't quite name. His head felt light after the wine, and there was a strange flutter in his pulse. He stepped away from the laughter and clinking glasses to get some fresh air, leaving Julia and David whispering together at the table behind him. That's when he heard it. his name, spoken in a hushed, urgent tone that barely sounded like Julia's voice. Michael paused in the shadow by the cabin door, heart suddenly hammering. At first, the truth did not reveal itself all at once. It crept in slowly, like poison, spreading with each word he overheard. Fragments of their conversation drifted through the night. He caught Julia's strained whisper about how, once their plan was done, they would have everything they wanted. David's low voice responded that Michael had no idea what was coming. Each muffled phrase was a dagger of realization. A chill ran down Michael's spine as the meaning became hideously clear. The woman he loved and the friend he trusted were planning something unspeakable, and that something was about him. Before Michael could fully process the betrayal, a floorboard creaked beneath his foot. The murmured plotting stopped. In the next instant, David appeared behind him, too close. Michael turned, confusion and hurt written on his face. David's expression was different now, cold, determined, quietly unhinged. Julia stepped into view as well, her eyes dark and unreadable in the moonlight. Michael managed to stammer a question, still hoping this was some terrible misunderstanding, but Julia only tilted her head with an almost pitying gaze. Without warning, David lunged forward and slammed Michael against the railing. The sudden violence knocked the breath out of him. Michael struggled. He was strong, but the drug in his wine had left his limbs heavy and his mind swimming. He looked desperately to Julia, eyes pleading, but she did not move to help. Instead, she reached out with an eerie calm and slid Michael's wedding ring off his finger. Julia leaned in close to Michael's ear and spoke softly, her words dripping with cruel finality. In essence, she gave him a twisted choice that was no choice at all. If he would not love her, then he would leave her, here and now, forever. It was a perverse echo of the vows they once shared, turning love into a death sentence. Michael's heart shattered as he realized the depth of her betrayal. With one final, coordinated shove, David and Julia heaved him overboard into the black abyss. The icy shock of the ocean hit Michael like a wall. Freezing water engulfed him, stealing the air from his lungs in a burst of bubbles and panic. He kicked and fought, but the sedative in his veins made his motion sluggish, as if he were moving through a nightmare. Above the waves, he could barely make out the figures of his wife and best friend leaning over the railing, watching to ensure he didn't resurface. Salt water burned his throat and flooded his lungs. Michael's vision dimmed as he sank into darkness. The last thing he saw before everything went black was Julia turning away, slipping his ring on a chain around her neck, and David wrapping a steady arm around her shoulders. They walked away together, silhouettes against the moonlight, leaving Michael to be claimed by the cold, indifferent sea. They left him for dead without a second thought. In their minds, Michael Grant drowned that night, swallowed by the unforgiving ocean. His fortune, his trust, his very life gone, just as they planned. The two traitors sailed off into the darkness, convinced their crime would sink without a trace. Michael was gone forever, or so they believed. Years slipped by quietly after that night, but Michael did not die in those black waters. By some miracle, or perhaps sheer will, he survived. Half dead and clinging to life, he washed ashore miles away and was found at dawn by a humble fishing boat. Michael Grant ceased to exist officially that night. Julia and David saw to it that he was declared dead, and they comfortably split his assets, never suspecting he was still out there. In the shadows, Michael spent years recovering, piecing himself back together in body and soul. The gentle, trusting man he once was had drowned, replaced by someone colder, patient, and calculating. Through old contacts and quiet observation, Michael kept tabs on the two who betrayed him. Every happy photo of Julia and David that surfaced, every whisper that the grieving widow and the loyal friend were growing closer, only fueled Michael's resolve. He waited, silently watching their lives from afar, until the moment was right to strike. That moment came 5 years later, during Julia and David's wedding festivities. The pair had finally decided to publicly tie the knot, confident that their dark secret was buried for good. They chose a lavish estate by the coast for their celebration, a setting rich with sunshine and smiles to disguise the sins of their past. But from the day their engagement was announced, strange occurrences began to plague the treacherous couple. It started small. Julia received a plain envelope with no return address among the wedding mail. Inside was a single item that made her blood run cold. A water-stained photograph of her and Michael from years ago, aboard a boat, both smiling at the camera. On the back, someone had scrawled the date of that fateful cruise. David, meanwhile, began getting late-night phone calls from an unlisted number. Whenever he answered, there was nothing but silence, except, if he listened closely, the faint sound of ocean waves crashing on a shore. At first, they each kept these incidents to themselves, unwilling to alarm or incriminate each other. But the tension between them quietly began to mount. As the wedding drew closer, the hauntings escalated. One evening, Julia entered her bedroom to find the French doors ajar and the curtains fluttering in the breeze. On her vanity mirror, fogged by the damp coastal air, 5 chilling words were written by an unseen hand. "I know what you did." Julia's heart nearly stopped. She scrubbed the message away with trembling hands, only to uncover another shock. On the dresser lay a tarnished silver ring, Michael's wedding ring, the very one she had taken from his finger the night he died. She had hidden that ring in a locked box years ago, unable to completely let go of her guilt or the last piece of him. Now it was here, out in the open, gleaming under the soft lamplight like an accusation. Panic seized her. How could it be here? Who had been in her room? That night, Julia barely slept. Every creak of the house set her nerves on edge. Every rustle of wind against the window made her bolt upright in bed with her pulse pounding. David, too, was unraveling. He would catch himself glancing over his shoulder whenever he walked alone, feeling eyes on him that he could never spot. One afternoon, he opened his briefcase at work to find all his papers and documents sopping wet, as if dunked in the ocean. The inside of the case was coated in salt residue and sand. It reeked of the sea. Ruined among those documents was a confidential prenuptial agreement he had drafted in secret, one that generously favored him in the event anything happened to Julia. David's hands shook as he realized someone must have found it and was sending a message. The humiliation and fear twisted into suspicion. That evening, he cornered Julia in the study, voice low and dangerous, and demanded to know if she had told anyone about what happened. Julia, equally on edge, snapped back that she thought he must have let something slip. Why else would they be hounded by these reminders of the past? They argued in circles, hurling thinly veiled accusations neither dared to say aloud. Each was too afraid to trust the other with the full truth of what they were experiencing. Each secretly wondered, could my partner, my accomplice, be behind this? Was it possible that Julia herself orchestrated the eerie threats as a twisted punishment or cold feet before the wedding? Or that David, racked with guilt or paranoia, was testing her loyalty with scare tactics? The once iron bond between them, forged in blood and betrayal, was corroding under the weight of distrust. And it was all going exactly as Michael intended. Piece by piece, he sowed discord like poison in their midst. He sent Julia an email from a phantom address that mimicked David's style, in which David spoke of nightmares about the man they wronged and hinted he might confess. When Julia discovered this message on her laptop, her blood went cold. Was David's conscience cracking? Meanwhile, Michael slipped a forged letter into David's desk. A letter written in Julia's voice, expressing fear that David might turn on her and detailing a plan to preemptively go to the authorities. When David found that letter, his stomach dropped. Was Julia preparing to betray him to save herself? By the eve of the wedding, both betrayers were drowning in doubt, each quietly convinced that the other might be hiding something or planning to double-cross. The trust between them, trust built on mutual deceit, was now tainted by the same poisonous suspicion with which they had destroyed Michael. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, the tension finally reached its breaking point. Julia and David stood in a grand ballroom filled with friends and family, trying to pretend everything was fine. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and catered delicacies, but neither Julia nor David could taste a thing. A storm was brewing outside, graying the evening sky and rumbling ominously. As a friend raised a glass to toast the couple, the lights suddenly flickered and went out. Gasps and nervous laughter rippled through the dark. In that hush, a projector somewhere in the room whirred to life. On the far wall, an image jittered into view. Grainy, drenched in the bluish hues of night vision. A home video of a boat rocking on dark water. Michael's boat. The camera, left forgotten that night of the cruise, had captured more than joyful memories. In stunned silence, the gathered guests watched the shaky footage. There was Michael in the frame, laughing with Julia, then a jump in the recording. And now, Julia and David stood together on the deck, unaware they were on film. Julia's back was turned, her arm raised as if struggling with someone. Then came a brief, chaotic glimpse of Michael's face flung towards the camera, eyes wide in shock, and the outline of David's arms pushing him overboard. Just as a collective cry of horror rose from the crowd, the projector crackled and died, leaving the ballroom in darkness once more. Chaos erupted. Someone screamed. Julia stood frozen, a hand clamped over her mouth, tears carving mascara-blackened lines down her cheeks. David lunged for the light switches, his mind reeling. Who had that tape? How? Guests murmured in confusion. Some thought it was a sick joke or part of the event. But Julia knew better. With a strangled sob, she gathered her skirts and bolted out into the storm without a word. David cursed under his breath and ran after her, calling her name as thunder roared overhead. Rain poured down in sheets as Julia fled across the estate's manicured garden, her elegant dinner dress soaking through. She collapsed to her knees beneath a gazebo, shaking violently, from cold, from fear, from the weight of 5 years of buried guilt now laid bare. David caught up, breathless and furious, and grabbed her arm. Under the strobing light of lightning, their carefully crafted lies unraveled at last. Julia whirled on him, voice hysterical. She accused David of setting up that horrifying display to torture her, to make her the scapegoat. David, wild-eyed and drenched, shouted back that he thought she had lost her mind and staged it to turn everyone against him. Words they had never dared to speak spilled out like venom. Julia's voice broke as she screamed that she'd sacrificed everything for him, that she'd killed her own husband and sold her soul so they could be together, and now it was all falling apart. David, face twisted with rage and panic, barked that if she hadn't grown so soft and paranoid they wouldn't be in this mess, that she was the one who wanted Michael dead for his money in the first place. Lightning snapped above, illuminating them in a ghostly flash, the bride and groom standing in their finery, leveling the ugliest of truths at each other. In that moment, each saw the other fully for what they were, The love that once bound them was drowned by mutual fear. And creeping into that garden, along with the thunder and rain, was the realization that neither of them was safe from the other now. A crack of thunder shook the ground as David's trembling hand went to the inside of his soaked jacket. With a snarl of desperation, he drew a knife, a decorative silver cake knife stolen from the dinner table, and pointed it at Julia. His last shred of control snapped. "No more chances," he hissed through gritted teeth. His words lost to the storm, though Julia read the intent in his eyes. If he eliminated her, the last person who knew the truth, perhaps he could still escape this nightmare with his freedom and Michael's fortune intact. Julia's eyes went wide with mortal terror. This was the final betrayal, a nightmare come full circle, the partner in crime now prepared to kill to save himself. She stumbled back, pleading with him to stop, to think of what they'd done and how they needed each other. But David was beyond reason. He lunged through the downpour, knife gleaming. Julia screamed and threw her arms up in a useless guard. A gunshot cracked the air. In blind panic, Julia had knocked over a heavy marble candle stand and had hit the ground with a bang. Misinterpreted as a gunshot by both in that split second. David flinched, and in that heartbeat, Julia seized the real opportunity. A hefty candlestick lay on the table where it had been left as decoration. With a surge of adrenaline, Julia snatched it up and swung with every ounce of fear and fury in her heart. The marble base connected with David's skull with a sickening thud. His knife fell from his hand as he crumpled to the wet grass. Julia stood over him, chest heaving, rain plastering her hair to her face. David's eyes were open in shock, blood mingling with rainwater under his head. He twitched once, a trembling hand reaching toward her, then went still. The man she had once betrayed her husband for now lay at her feet, possibly dead by her own trembling hands. In the hush that followed, only the storm kept raging. Julia dropped the candlestick, the clang barely audible over her sobbing breaths. She stared at David's motionless body in disbelief and horror. What had she done? What had they become? As if in answer, a figure emerged from the darkness between two swaying oak trees. Michael stepped forward at last, rainwater cascading off his shoulders, his face caught in a flash of lightning. He had witnessed everything. Julia fell to her knees in the mud, rain mingling with the hot tears on her face as Michael approached. In the span of a single night, everything she thought she had gained was lost. The power she once held, the secrets, the money, the upper hand, had been stripped away. Now she was just a broken woman, alone beside the lifeless body of her lover. Looking up at Michael's face, she hardly recognized the man she had betrayed. There was no warmth there, no pity, only cold, unyielding resolve. In that moment, Julia understood true fear. All her manipulations and careful plans had unraveled. The predator she believed herself to be was now prey, caught in the sights of the man she had tried to destroy. Michael stared down at the two people who had taken everything from him. David's eyes were glazed, a final expression of shock etched on his pale features. He died, never comprehending how completely Michael had turned the tables. Julia was shivering violently, whether from the cold or terror or grief, perhaps all three. And Michael? He felt nothing. Or perhaps something worse than nothing. For years he had dreamed of this moment, imagined how satisfying it might be to watch them atone. But as he stood there, the rain soaking through to his bones, Michael was eerily calm. He was stronger now, yes. He had seized control and delivered justice by his own hand, but he was colder too. The part of him that once knew how to love, how to trust, had been extinguished the night Julia and David left him for dead. A bolt of lightning lit up the sky like daylight as Michael knelt down. In the grass lay his old wedding ring, gleaming with rain. The delicate band of silver Julia had pulled from his finger that night had meant love and devotion. Now it was a token of lies and betrayal. Michael picked it up slowly. For a long moment, he turned the ring in his fingers, remembering the man he had been, a man who believed in promises. Those days were gone. With a steady hand, he set the ring on the ground in front of Julia. She let out a choked whimper, reaching toward him with shaking fingers as if he were salvation. "Michael, she croaked, her voice thin and broken. He silenced her with a hard gaze and a slight shake of his head. There was nothing left to say. They both knew the truth of what she had done and what he had become. Julia's shoulders crumpled. She clutched herself and began to sob uncontrollably, the realization of what she'd lost crashing over her. The love of the man she betrayed, the trust of the partner she'd conspired with. All of it was destroyed, and she was the cause. As Julia wept in the mud, Michael rose. In the distance, sirens wailed through the storm. The disturbed wedding guests must have called the authorities. Red and blue lights appeared, flashing against the iron gates of the estate. Julia looked up through the rain, panic jolting through her. The police were coming, and with them, judgment. "Michael, please," she begged incoherently, water streaming down her face. But Michael had already turned away. He cast one last look back at the crumpled, sobbing figure of the woman he once loved. There was no triumph in his eyes, no glee, only a somber finality. His vengeance was complete. Without a word, Michael stepped back and faded into the shadows beyond the garden, the darkness swallowing him up just as the first police officers rushed onto the scene. He left Julia to the consequences of their sins, the attempted murder, the blood on her hands from David's death. All of it would now come crashing down on her. In the end, the two traitors had destroyed each other. Michael had no need to lift another finger. As he disappeared into the rain-soaked night, Julia's wail cut through the air, a howl of misery and regret that would haunt anyone who heard it. Michael closed his eyes for a second, rain mixing with the tears he wouldn't allow himself to shed. The man who walked away was not the same man who had boarded that boat 5 years ago. That Michael was gone, and whatever part of him remained would have to learn to live with the darkness that now filled him. Trust and betrayal, two sides of a deadly coin. Michael's tale is a harsh reminder that the deepest wounds are often inflicted by those closest to us. A single act of treachery can transform love into hatred, turning a kind, trusting soul into a stranger haunted by vengeance. Julia and David's plan was born of greed and selfish passion, but in the end it led to their own destruction. Betrayal, like a poison, had seeped into their lives and consumed them from within. Julia learned too late that when you betray someone so completely, you also unravel your own fate. In trying to control and destroy Michael, she ultimately destroyed herself. Michael's revenge was as calculated and merciless as the betrayal that created it, a dark mirror reflecting all the pain he'd endured. In this twisted game of trust, broken and avenged, karma came for Julia and David in the form of the very man they thought they had eliminated. And yet, Michael's victory came at a price. The hopeful, loving man he once was will never return. In his place stands someone who has walked through the fire of hate and come out tempered into steel. Did it truly set him free, or did it bind him forever to the night of that betrayal? The question lingers, heavy as the coastal fog. Was the revenge worth the cost of becoming what he had to become? In the end, Love Me or Leave Me Dead is not just Michael's story. It's a cautionary tale about the fragile bonds of trust and the destructive power of betrayal. It forces us to consider the darkness that can grow in the human heart when love is twisted by treachery. Would you have forgiven such a betrayal, or would you too have let it fester, waiting for the moment to strike back? When trust is shattered and love turns to poison, each of us must ask ourselves, if you were in Michael's shoes, would you forgive, or would you get revenge? Thank you for listening to this dark tale of betrayal and retribution. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. What do you think of Michael's revenge? Were his actions justified, or did he go too far? And what would you have done if you were in his position? Would you have the strength to forgive, or would you seek vengeance? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your insights make these stories even more powerful. If you enjoyed this story, stay tuned for the next one. The next story begins with a wedding invitation and a hidden secret. Until then, remember, trust is a precious gift. Guard it well, because once it's broken, the wound may never fully heal.